Hello. Welcome to today's webinar on understanding emotional maturity. I am Giselle. You've obviously found me through my Instagram, so you're familiar with who I am. I'll give a little bit more background about me in a bit. But today we are going to be talking about becoming emotionally mature. What is it? How do we do this? How do we achieve this? And I'll first just say, why is it so important for us to become emotionally mature in the first place, right? It's important because like all of our skills that we develop, reading skills, learning to walk, learning to speak, emotional development is an often neglected and overlooked piece of our development, but it is a very important part of our development. And the work that I do involves teaching adults how to attain the skills that they might not have learned growing up to manage their emotions in healthy and positive ways, right? And so when we become emotionally mature, everything in our life improves. Our relationship with ourselves improves, our relationship with others improves. It really sets us up for success because it allows us to navigate the ups and downs of life with resilience. It allows us to navigate the awkward and uncomfortable moments with skill, with grace, with ease. And so that's why emotional maturity and understanding emotional maturity is so important, which is why I'm so glad that you've decided to watch this webinar today and to be here with me to learn about this. I'm very excited about this work that I do. And if you stay to the end, I have worked very, very hard on a supportive offer for you that I'll tell you a little bit more about at the end of this presentation. Okay, so who am I? Let me just make sure that the screen is, I hope you're seeing this screen. So who am I? My name is Giselle. I am a certified coach practitioner, and I teach, like I said, adults about emotional resilience, about emotional intelligence. I am first and foremost a human being. So I have spent my entire life experiencing my emotions, and I'm somebody that has always felt my feelings very deeply and very strongly. And I experienced a lot of trauma and emotional neglect that didn't allow me to develop a healthy relationship with my emotions, right? Today, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm an author, I'm the host of the Mighty Emotions podcast. And like I said, I'm a trauma survivor and I've been in recovery for 7 years now. I am certified by the Canadian Coaches Federation. I'm also certified in psychological first aid from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in helping adults deal with emotional crisis. I also hold a specialization in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. And so I combine my experience and my education to guide folks through, developing their emotional intelligence and awareness and learning these skills that I'm going to share with you today. So on my Instagram, for those of you who found me through my social media, I asked folks to tell me what they think or how did they define emotional maturity. And here are some of the answers that I got. They're all very, very different, but similar in so many different ways. And I found them all so interesting because the consensus seems to be that emotional maturity is an action of some sort. It's a response in some way, like pausing, controlling emotions, not tearing people down, treating people well, holding space. These are all actions, right? And then there's also a consensus that it's a part mindset, knowing how to handle whatever comes your way, understanding your emotions better, recognizing, getting curious. So we recognize that emotional maturity is a combo of tangible, how we act, and intangible, how we think, right? We have the mindset part. If we have the mindset part down, we're going to act in a way that shows that we are emotionally mature. And today, the purpose of today's webinar is to hopefully give you a clear and concise definition that simplifies what it is so that you know how to recognize it in yourself and others. So we're going to take all of this and we're going to distill it down to something that's really clear and easy to understand. I'm going to start by sharing this slide with these two graphics on it. And we're going to talk about maturity, right? What is maturity in general? Maturity is being well developed. So going through the stages of growth and becoming well developed. And I have this image here of the plants because it shows that, it demonstrates that. But this arrow on the side here also shows that trajectory of growth, right? Maturity, by definition, is wisdom that comes with practical application of knowledge. So it's not just having an understanding, it's not just having this information, whatever we talk about today, but maturity, becoming well-developed, is a combination of learning and then applying what we learn to grow, in order to grow. So if we look at the image of the plant, we see the various stages of growth of the plant, but I chose this image because it doesn't just show the plants growing, it also shows the resources required for the plants to grow. The hand symbolizing support from others, the water, the sun, the soil, symbolizing the right environment. So emotional maturity, developing our emotional intelligence and our emotional skills, it's not just on us. It's not something we can just do on our own. It's dependent on having the resources to support us as we develop. It's not just about knowledge, as I said, it's about applying that knowledge and getting the support we need with that. So if we're children and we're left on our own to figure out our emotions, we're not going to be able to develop. Our development is going to be stunted because it requires that support. It requires our caregivers to teach us how to regulate our emotions in a healthy way. It requires our caregivers to model that for us and to create an environment where we're safe enough to express our emotions, we're safe enough to explore our emotions. And a lot of us didn't have that, right? And so our emotional development became stunted at whatever age that was where we didn't get that. And as we go through life and we experience all these different things, it's human and it's natural that we're going to pick up these coping mechanisms that are often toxic in a long-term use, right? Perfectionism, people pleasing, all these different ways that we try to protect ourselves and take care of ourselves because we're not sure how to handle our emotions. We didn't get that right environment. We still grow, but our development is stunted. The other image I chose of the arrow is because growth is not just a straight line. It goes up and down. While it's still going up, it has bumps along the way. And we will have moments in our emotional development where we regress or we experience something new and it sends us in what we feel to be a backwards spiral. But I want you to remember that each step that we take forward is better than what it was. We're not going to go back to not knowing. We can't undo the knowledge that we have. So even when it feels sometimes like we're not growing, we're still acting in these emotionally immature ways, that's not actually what's happening, right? It's just that's how growth feels sometimes. And if you think about kids learning to walk and developing that skill of walking, they have to fall many times until they get the technique down, right? But it's not just the technique that they require, they also have to be physically developed enough. They have to have the right muscular structure, the right bone structure to hold themselves upright and be able to walk. They also need support. So maybe they'll use an item like a walker, or they'll have a caregiver there to help them. All of these things combine to encourage our growth and in a healthy way. And the point I'm really trying to drive home is that we don't mature on our own. We mature in the context of our environment, our support, our resources, and by taking action and practically applying what we learn. So that's why as a coach, I'm here to support people as they work to apply the knowledge, to check in and see how are things going, how are you developing, where do you need further support? Because like I said, these resources, this environment needs to be conducive to our growth in order for us to become well-developed. And so I want to talk about 3 things that we think are signs of emotional maturity, but they're actually not. 3 common misconceptions, right? Controlling our behavior, expressing our feelings, stoicism. So first of all, controlling our behavior. A lot of us think, well, I'm not yelling at you, I'm suppressing it, or I'm not lashing out, whatever it is. That is not a sign necessarily of emotional maturity. Controlling our behavior is important, but it's a sign that we understand consequences more than it's a sign that we are well-developed. Remember, emotional maturity is about being well-developed, understanding our emotions. And we'll get into the details of that later, but controlling our behavior, just because someone is able to not physically lash out or verbally lash out doesn't necessarily mean that they're emotionally mature. The second one is expressing our feelings. A lot of times we're taught, talk about what you're feeling, talk about what you're feeling. And that's very important. It's important to be able to communicate. It's important to feel safe enough to do that. But that is just one level of development. That's like the child starting to crawl, right? A lot of times we're not actually talking about our feelings. We'll be expressing our frustration. We'll be talking about the situation that happened or the person that upset us or the worries that we have. We're not actually taught how to talk about what we're feeling and to talk about our emotions or to name it. So that's why this isn't necessarily a sign of emotional maturity, right? And another element of things is that as we begin to develop our emotional intelligence, children start to look to their caregivers to tell them, to mirror back to them what they're feeling. So if we express our feelings and it's not met with support, or it's shut down or it's shunned, then we develop a very warped way of understanding or looking at our emotions. And so we'll express it in that way going forward, or we'll avoid expressing certain feelings going forward, right? We need to feel safe to be able to do this. Complaining and venting is not expressing our feelings. It's something that we think is emotional maturity, but it's not, right? Complaining and venting is more so looking for someone to give us reassurance. And like I said, it's like crawling before we walk. The other one is stoicism. And this is a trap that I fell into because I thought, being super logical, almost aloof, indifferent, the definition of stoicism is essentially the courage to bear pain or misfortune. I thought that I was super emotionally intelligent because I could tolerate a lot of crap and I wouldn't lash out, or I wouldn't take it out on anyone else. I would hold it in. And I tried to just negate my feelings and push them to the side and think, these are for children and adults. We think we don't need to feel our emotions. And this is the pinnacle of emotional immaturity, right? I've learned that it actually stunts your ability to develop emotionally because it's a form of minimizing your emotions and trying to bypass them. And if we're doing that, then we're not developing them, right? We're pushing them to the side. So again, we're stunting our development. So I wanted to throw this in here just so you could see that some of the ways we think are signs of emotional maturity actually are not. So what is emotional maturity? Emotional maturity is this definition here: the ability to fully recognize, experience, understand, and respond to our emotional cues. And I want to highlight the word fully because all 4 of these italicized words here, recognize, experience, understand, and respond, are required in order to say we've developed emotionally, right? Understanding this process is our responsibility. And there are going to be times when we have some of these and not all of this. And this is why I included that arrow, because this is normal as we develop. There's going to be times when we can maybe experience it, but not recognize it, or recognize it, but not understand it. But when we have all of these, that is when we can say, okay, we have emotional maturity. We are well developed in our emotional cues and understanding our emotional cues, right? And as I mentioned in the beginning with the plant, sometimes we don't have all the resources we need to process it in the moment. You know, we have a lot of stress. There's traumatic, unprecedented times. I wonder if anyone's familiar with those words. Yeah, there are times when things are just completely overwhelming. And it doesn't mean that we're not well developed if we can't handle it in a certain way in that moment. But it is important to be aware of how we could handle it well, right? And this getting to this level of being able to respond in the moment in a default way that is healthy and positive is about sustained practice. With the right conditions, the right practice, with the right support, we can all be emotionally mature. We can all develop these emotional skills. It's no different than when you're in school and they make you do math quiz after math quiz or spelling quiz after spelling quiz. And eventually you can spell a word, and eventually you pick up different techniques to be able to do it more efficiently or to do it in your head or whatever the case may be. It's the same with our emotions. We have to make the time and the effort to develop this skill. It's not something we're naturally going to develop. And if we don't make the time and effort, we'll be stunted in this way. And like I said, it impacts every area of our lives. So let's break this down. Recognize, experience, understand, and respond. What do I mean by recognize? Emotional awareness is the first step. Do we know which emotions are showing up? Are we honest with ourselves about what we are experiencing at any given moment? We judge ourselves a lot because we have these preconceived ideas about which emotions are appropriate, which emotions are inappropriate. That's how we've been conditioned. There are no inappropriate emotions. Our emotions are showing us what our honest experience is in any given moment. So can we be honest with ourselves and say, I'm feeling ashamed right now. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling disappointed. That's the recognized piece, right? And even if you start off by saying, I feel uncomfortable, I don't feel good, that's a good enough place to start, right? To know, to recognize that you're having an experience that isn't autopilot. Something's happening that you're aware of. The next is experience. Can we sit with our discomfort? This is so crucial and it's so key because we do not want to sit with our discomfort, and we're not designed to sit with our discomfort. We're not designed to suppress our emotions. If you study children, if you look at young children, when they begin to notice their emotions, they have tantrums, they scream, they throw themselves all over the place, they cry. That is us as humans getting our emotional energy out. That is us processing in our body, but we're conditioned to shut it down, to hold it in, to suppress it. And that leaves us with a constant state of discomfort. And often we end up bottling it up and it ends up coming out as passive aggression or other forms of, lashing out, whatever it may be. We build, it builds, we develop resentment. We don't allow ourselves to experience it in that moment, honestly, recognizing it. We go into our minds and we think about, we ruminate about what happened over and over, all the things we want to say, but we're stopping ourselves from saying, I'm not suggesting that we say the things that are on our mind, but I am suggesting that we learn that experiencing our emotions involves sitting with the discomfort we feel in our physical bodies. That's where we experience our emotions, in our bodies, in our limbs, in our shoulders, tightness in our stomach, tightness in our throat. That is our emotions being experienced by our bodies. And what happens is when we feel activated, we go into our mind, we start thinking about things, and we cut ourselves off from what our body is physically experiencing. And sitting with our discomfort is just about getting grounded and tuning into what's happening in our body. If we stop, if we slow down, if we pause, we will notice our body experiencing our emotions. We will notice some kind of electricity coursing through our limbs. And that's all we have to do, is allow ourselves to experience that, notice that, and not get in the way of that, not micromanage that process. And our body will process that energy. And we will notice ourselves calming down, our nervous system will calm down, rather than panicking because we feel uncomfortable and speeding up and rushing and doing this and doing that and trying to get out and trying to escape it, or shutting down and holding it in and suppressing it and holding on to it. We're designed to experience our emotions. So can we sit with our discomfort? That's the second piece. The third piece is understanding. Do we know what our emotional cues mean? When I say emotional cues, what I mean is that each of our emotions is a cue letting us know that something's out of alignment, something's up, something doesn't feel right with us or right for us. That's information that our emotions are providing. So if we're hungry, that's a cue that we need to eat, that our body is deprived of food. If we're tired, that's a cue that we need to rest. So our emotions are cues, just like hunger, just like being tired, that there's stuff going on within us. And what is that stuff? Our needs, and we have many needs, we have lower and higher needs, are the things that we require to survive, to thrive as human beings. And we tend to focus a lot on our lower needs, our physiological needs of food, shelter, sleep, safety needs, you know, having the resources that we need, having good health. Those are very, very important. However, we have higher needs as well that we tend to minimize or discredit. But when those needs are getting met, our emotions are going to be showing up over and over and over to let us know that these needs are being neglected. So our higher needs are things like friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection, right? Our self-esteem. Do we feel good about ourselves? Do we have recognition for who we are? Are people allowing us to express who we are? Do we have that safety? Do we have validation? Do we have acceptance? Do we have agency? Do we feel like we are in control of ourselves and our lives? We get to decide what we can do or what we want to do. We can do what's best for us. Are we self-actualized? The ability to be the highest version of ourselves, to feel in flow, to feel like we are achieving our goals. These are things that are these are needs, right? We tend to think of these things as, oh, it's fine if you don't have this. But our emotions are going to show up in the moments when we don't have this, because it's sending the cue that we need these needs to be met. When we don't meet these needs in healthy ways, we think that we're good. But the reality is, subconsciously, we're trying to get these needs met in not so healthy ways. That need for love, that is a very valid human need. If we don't get that met in a healthy way, we're going to go to a toxic relationship or a toxic friendship. Because without being conscious of it, those emotions are driving our behavior, driving us subconsciously to seek those out. So when we become emotionally mature and we get to the understand step, when we can understand what need this emotion is showing us that we have been neglecting or that we need to attend to, then we can choose, then we have the power of choice to choose healthy ways to get those needs met, to choose the right relationships to get those needs met. And when our needs are met, that's when we feel what we call positive emotions, joy and hope and excitement. That's when we're in alignment. That's when we are able to say, I have what I need in this moment, I'm good. When these needs are not met, like I said, discomfort is going to show up and it's going to highlight to us that these needs are not being met. So it's important to understand what our needs are and how we can get them met in healthy ways. And I'm going to suggest that if you haven't heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm going to suggest that you look that up. It's a triangle, a pyramid of needs, and to start to think about which needs do you maybe not have in your life right now. And what emotions might be showing up to flag for you, what emotional cues are coming up. And then the last step is responding. We tend to go straight from feeling uncomfortable to responding. And that's when we're going to respond in an inappropriate way, because we're not actually responding to the need, we're responding in an effort to find relief from the emotion. When we're afraid of our emotions, we're always going to be running from them. And when we don't understand them, we're going to be afraid of them. So that's why it goes in this order, right? And in the response step, this is when we are taking action to meet our underlying needs. We have to take inventory, we have to do some reflecting to determine what is it that we really need, what's underlying here, what are our beliefs, and how can we address this in positive ways. Finding options that are healthy beforehand, before we're in that triggered or activated state. So an example of this is, if we're hungry, we know that's a cue that we need to eat, and we have options, right? Do I eat a snack bar? Do I eat a meal? Do I go in the fridge? Do I cook something? Do I go to Uber? That's what I mean about options. And so when we know what our needs are, my need for love, how do I get that met? Do I have a pet? Do I have an animal? Do I have a close friend that I know I can rely on? Am I good with my family members? Do I have some kind of community of support that I can turn to get that need of love met? Because we need that is an underlying need. And so how can we create options to respond to those needs so that we're meeting them in healthy ways and not unhealthy ways? And being able to move through these 4 steps is a process and is a practice. So recognizing what we're feeling, experiencing it, tuning into what our body is experiencing and letting that energy processing, okay, what is the underlying need that I need to look at, that I need to address, and then responding appropriately to the need that is showing up. And sometimes it's many, right? And sometimes it's moving through this process numerous times until we get to clarity. That's why I use this image, because when we don't understand our emotions, it's like this first light bulb. The light bulb can't go off, the cord is tangled. But as we go through this process, we untangle the cord until we get the clarity and we end up back in alignment, right? And the reason coaching is so important is because we have a safe container with someone who can help us as we're moving through this. It's messy. It's messy for all of us. Learning to do anything new is messy. And so getting the right resources, the right support before we're triggered, before we're activated, in order to learn the skills and the tools so that we are prepared when real life happens and things come up. We've got the training, right? There's a quote that says, you can't see the back of your head without 2 mirrors. We need other people. We're interdependent beings. We need support in some way, right? Because our emotions hijack our ability to think clearly. And being able to have someone to give us another perspective, we don't know what we don't know, right? So whether it's a coach, whether it's a trusted friend that you feel is, has this emotional maturity down pat, whether it's a therapist, getting support to learn to develop these skills is so important. It's like I said, it's just like kids learning to walk. And even after you learn to walk, it doesn't mean you're never going to trip. But now you know how to get back up. You have the tools to stand back up and start walking again, right? Or to know in a situation that I need to ask someone to help me up. That's what this process is allowing us to achieve. So now I want to tell you what I've created to help you support you in this process, because like I said, I can't coach everyone one-on-one, but I wanted to give people something that they could use to move through this by themselves, but also getting some support from me. So I've created an ebook, and it's a workbook. It's 31 days of reflections and questions, journal prompts, to allow you to sit with these thoughts and allow you to ask yourself the kind of questions that you would be asked by me or a therapist to get this peace and this clarity around your emotions, right? How to become more emotionally mature. It's about working through getting the knowledge and then applying the knowledge in our lives, like I said. And so here's what a reader had to say. This workbook will transform the way you relate to your emotions. It's practical, clear, and engaging. Giselle's workbook is what we all need when it comes to embracing all parts of ourselves and gaining deeper self-awareness. The compassionate and understanding tone will leave you feeling seen and heard. If you want to understand how your feelings guide you in life, learn concrete tools to gain insight into your emotions, and most importantly, you want to heal, this workbook is for you. It's very kind of her, right? And the workbook, like I said, it's 31 days of reflections and journal prompts, but you are able to work through it at your own pace. And I did it because these are the questions that I have used throughout my 7 years of journeying to this point to develop this awareness, to develop this knowledge of what our emotions are communicating to us. And I also include some exercises in the workbook as well, right? If you don't love the way that you respond to your emotions right now, you feel very deeply, you want to learn how to stop being overwhelmed by your emotions, this is why I've designed this workbook, because I was there myself. And I still go back to this sometimes, I'll be honest. And I look at these questions because it really is, like I said, an ongoing practice. And it's important to make that space and that time to learn what our emotions are trying to communicate to us and understand what are healthy ways we can get our needs met. However, I didn't want to just leave you hanging with this workbook if you're brand new to this work and you're confused and it's not, you want to understand it more, get more context to help you build more habits, or you want an accountability partner. I want to help you be accountable. So I've also created a private Facebook community for everyone who's working through the workbook. And in the private Facebook community, there are 31 video lessons for each section as well. It gives a bit more context to the section. I've included a guided meditation to help you sitting with your discomfort and tuning into your body and experiencing that. There's some scripts, there's some worksheets, some PDF worksheets. So I wanted to give you as much supportive materials that I could. And you also have the chance to ask me questions as you're working through it and receive my support directly. So if you have, questions about the workbook, that's one question you can ask. Or if you're struggling in an area and you're wondering what section of the workbook could help you move through that, you can ask that as well. And I do have the settings set so that it is anonymous. You can ask the questions anonymously. No one has to know that it's you. But I wanted to really provide some kind of ongoing support for people that are working through this workbook, because I know sometimes we buy journals or we buy workbooks and then we just kind of forget about them and we don't go anywhere. I wanted to keep you kind of accountable because I believe this emotional development work is so, so important. So I just want to say thank you for coming to this webinar today. If you would like to connect with me, my email is on the screen here. And my Instagram is mighty_emotions, where you probably found me. And if you're searching for the group on Facebook, it's the Mighty Emotions Collective. So the ebook, I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen so that I can add the link to the chat. The ebook is on Amazon. And if you're in Canada, it's a different link than if you're in the States. Let me just add it to the chat for anyone who's interested. Also, if you aren't able to grab the link from the chat, send me a message on Instagram and I can share it with you. But essentially, let me turn my camera on. Hi. Essentially, this is what I have created for you. And I hope that, well, I know from the people that have worked through it that they have been able to strengthen their relationship with their emotions, see their emotions in positive, empowering ways, and develop that personal confidence and self-awareness that we all could benefit from. And it has improved, their relationship with themselves and with others. So I encourage you, if you're interested in getting my support, please. The workbook is only 11, I think it's 11 bucks Canadian. I didn't want to make it complicated or expensive. I wanted to get it to as many people as possible because I really, really believe that when we can all develop our emotional awareness and our emotional intelligence, we can create an amazing world for all of us. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. If there's any questions, I don't see any questions, but if you have any questions, reach out to me. I love chatting with you guys. I love hearing from you. And I hope that you got something from today's webinar. All right, have a good evening, everyone.